Hello, this is Michael Eure, and I'd like to invite you to the Michael Eure Show, featuring student hosts and very special guests talking about a variety of interesting topics. You can find us on the Eagle Stream YouTube channel.
Hey, Michael, your mic's muted.
We always do that. Thank you, Jerry. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Michael Eure Show. We have a very special show today. We have Faith Anthony Mejia. I'm going to let her introduce herself. And Melania, I'm going to let her introduce herself in a minute. And then Jerry is always with us. And we're going to talk about the topic where we're focusing on Hispanic Heritage Month. So if everybody could quickly just give them your name and not much more, okay? And we can start with Jerry since he knows how to do it, and then Faith.
My name is Jerry Green. This is my second year here at Wake Tech. I'm majoring in cybersecurity, and I've been working alongside Mike Eure here as a student success coach, outreach ambassador.
Hello, my name is Faith Anthony Mejia. I am a constant student. I don't know if I can say scholar yet of Latin American history, specifically focusing on Blackness in Latin America.
Good afternoon. My name is Melania Aguirre Raven. I am the Department Head for Foreign Languages and Fine Arts at Wake Tech, and looking forward to having this conversation today.
And thank you. And Sarah, if we can just go through the success coach piece real quick, and then we'll do the slideshow, and then we'll start with questions. So if you can kind of move us over, yes. And this is, I'm a student success coach, and this is our webpage. We don't need to click anything, but students, I just want you to be familiar. I'll scroll down a little bit, Sarah. And I just want you to always get to resources and stop there. This is how you can get to the library, the ILC tutoring. You can get to career employment resources, but most of the things that students need are right there. So that's all I want to share about that. And it is successcoach.waketech.edu. And you can hear that later. All right, I'm finished with that one. And then we're ready for the slideshow real quick. Thank you. Sarah's in the background doing all of this, and we asked her to do this, and we appreciate it. And then we're going to get right into the meat of the show. Is there a problem with the slides? Okay. Not those. The ones that Jerry sent you this morning. Those belong to Faith. Those slides. And if it's a problem opening it, we can just start with the questioning. Is there a problem? Okay, thank you. The African-American Latino Mixer. The Michael Eure Show was pleased to sponsor this on campus in person the last, I think, Thursday of June. It was June the 30th. And we had it in the conference center on the Southern Wake campus, so we can flip to the next slide. And these are just some images of that. And we started off with Dr. Chris O'Riordan Aja, and he played the djembe drums. And so that was our African welcome. And at the table in the back, you'll see several people, but the guy sitting at the front is Dr. Michael Beck, who is the Dean of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences at Wake Tech. Next, please. And this young lady, her name was Genesis Escobar, I believe, but she is from Venezuela, and she played the violin, and she was spectacular. So next. And then this is Laura Bethay, and she has many hats, and I'm not going to say all of them, but she works in career and employment resources, and she's our Title IX administrator, and she also works with equity inclusion for Wake Tech. And she greeted the audience virtually, thanks to Jerry Green, our cybersecurity student. Next. And this is Freddie Green Trio, and the musician farther back is, he was from Venezuela. You're gonna hear him later. And there's Jerry way back in the back. Next, and Freddie Green, and you'll see him later. This is the two guys that played, and they were from Venezuela. They were good. It was a lot of people there from Venezuela for some reason. Next, and these young ladies, they were dancing and showing us their dresses from their Latin American countries. And I think most of them were from South America. Next. and this is Dr. Armin Smallwood. You can see the back of his head, but he came to offer our students to transfer to A&T to major in history or political science because he's the chairman of history and political science at North Carolina A&T, which is the #1 public HBCU in the United States. So I think it's very important that we connect with them more. Next. And then we had a dance, and I mean, the students taught everybody else how to dance, and it was a nice little floor, and we enjoyed it. And that's it for my slides. And now we're ready to get with the questioning for Faith. And Jerry, are you ready for the first?
All right, Faith, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Two things first. First of all, the mixer looked amazing, and I'm a little jealous that I missed it. I love being able to see those collaborative moments. Second of all, I want to say a special thank you to Sarah, who you do not see physically here, but thank you so much for all your hard work and being the magic hands behind the scenes. A little bit about myself. My name is Faith Anthony Mejia, as shared before. I am a native of Charlotte, North Carolina. My particular heritage is African American, and I come from a family full of musicians. And so my door to history was actually through music. For some people, it's an art visit. For some people, it's looking at their family history. For other people, it's food. My door was music, and I fell in love with music from the Latin American region. And so that initially exposed me to getting really focused and zoning in on learning Spanish language, and then later falling in love with Latin American history. And I was privileged enough to be able to get my master's degree from UNC Charlotte and get specific studies with social constructs in Latin America with race, gender, and citizenship. And that is a little bit about me.
Okay.
And because you have such a great presentation, we're only going to ask one more question, and then we're going to go straight to your presentation.
Sounds good. Going with the flow.
All right, Faye, what is the environment like studying information about the Latino community and its many intersections with Native Americans, Africans, Spanish, and others?
Oh, man. That crossover with African ancestry, Native American ancestry, Spanish ancestry, it's an overwhelming study, and it's overwhelming in various ways. There are some positive sides, and there are some more anxiety-inducing sides of the study. With the positive side, I just love seeing how we are all connected at the end of the day. Seeing how our cultures, how we all have different histories of oral history, the way that a lot of our culture revolves around music, dance, and food, how we express our joy, how we advocate for ourselves throughout history. It all matches up in certain ways. And so it's always beautiful to study that. But then there are some overlaps that are also a little bit sad. We also share different traumas. We share experiences with very similar types of oppression. And so there are times where I do have to take breaks in my own study. There are times where I have to check my own biases when I'm reading through. But studying those overlaps is definitely well worth it. And I think that whatever your entryway is into the study, it's definitely worth your while. So it's been a fun journey so far.
Okay. And Melania, at this point, do you have any comments of what you've heard so far?
I think just the celebration that we're all humans, and that we all share the same feelings and needs. It may be manifested in different ways, but ultimately we are all part of the same.
Okay. All right, Sarah, we're ready to move on to the side and let Faith go through her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. And thanks again, Sarah. Thank you, Jerry, for those wonderful questions. So a little bit again about me and seeing how I have been in this constant evolving conversation with myself and others about Hispanic heritage. I'm going to start off with my entry into the field, what fascinates me about it, and then my personal theory and idea of what healthy and holistic celebration can look like in the future for Hispanic Heritage Month. Next slide, please. Awesome. So my first interaction with understanding fully what the African diaspora is and what it looks like actually occurred in the 8th grade for me. I have a very specific memory of being in a history classroom, and I decided to do a project on Peru. And so when I pulled up the certain group that I was looking for, I saw that they looked like me. And I felt a wave of emotions. I felt joy and excitement to dig in and meeting, some more cousins in the Americas. And then I also felt a lot of hurt as well. Like, how could I not know that the diaspora is outside of the US and the Gold Coast of Africa. I know that a lot of critique that we see nationwide when you study specifically Black history or any type of ethnic history, it's kind of like transatlantic slave trade, pause, and then they maybe talk about, Martin Luther King, pause, Obama, and then you graduate, So we already have huge gaps in understanding Blackness and Black history. So that was a huge realization for me at that period in time. And so at that point, a switch kind of turned on and I was like, okay, I need to know more. I need to learn more. And I need to respect this culture. As a person who is not of Latin American heritage, I had to go about it in a very specific and respectful way. So I dedicated my undergraduate career to learning Spanish language, getting the linguistics down, understanding multicultural communication and how language plays with geography. And then for my graduate career, I was able to study race theory in different spaces and talk about identity and social constructs. So it's been kind of a constant evolution. And I never really abandoned the earlier parts of my study. They always come back around, but there have definitely been ebbs and flows in my focus. Next slide, please. This was the image that changed everything for me. So 8th grade Faith dug deep into Google when it wasn't really as strong as it was today, but we did our best. I was able to find this image and this kind of made everything click for me for various reasons. You see here that it not only highlights the routes of the trade of enslaved people, but also highlights numbers. So in the US, you see 500,000. And as you continue south, you see almost 5 million in the West Indies, 5 million in Brazil and South America, in places that we wouldn't really anticipate because it's not necessarily highlighted. So this was kind of a door for me to understand the omnipresence of Blackness in Latin America, both in history and today. And then also seeing that all these connections make sense. When I look at certain dishes that are national dishes, I see my heritage from Africa. When I listen to different genres of music like merengue and bachata and salsa, we're in there. When I look at art forms, dance forms, and social structure, looking at storytelling and literature, it all kind of clicked for me due to seeing this image and wanting to dig deeper. Next slide, please. So yes, when I'm teaching, no matter if I'm teaching people who are adults gathering resources to teach others about Latin American history, or if I'm showing this to a group of high schoolers or middle schoolers, I show these next slide. We can go back and forth between this slide and the next one, understanding what being Latin American or what being Latinx looks like. Everybody on these slides have Latin American heritage. They all have their own story to tell. And if we kind of paint a small picture, how can we appreciate the beauty of all of what Latin American culture and history is? Next slide, please. And then another one. Next slide, please. So when I think about this and when I think about my own place in history in the diaspora, I was kind of able to figure out three main things for what celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month should look like and can look like in the future. And I'm open, of course, to feedback on this or additions to this that you guys here listening may think of. But the first is recognition and understanding that Black heritage is aligned with Latin American history and vice versa. You can't talk about Latin American history without talking about Black history and vice versa. The second would be reconciliation and having candid conversations about race in Latin America and leaning into regional and global anti-racist work, whether this looks like starting something new or leaning into the advocacy that has been happening for decades and for centuries in these regions. And the last would be celebration, of course, and a holistic look of all that Latin American culture encompasses and figuring out what that looks like, whether it's seeing African influence, seeing Asian influence, talking about indigenous influence, and making sure that it's an inclusive celebration. That is it for kind of where my mind is with the celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month in terms of my perspective and my areas of expertise. So we can open up the next slide. That's just a Q&A slide and close that if you're comfortable with it. And I'm open to any questions.
Well, I have one, but when Dr. Smallwood came, he talked about the triracial identity of Native Americans, particularly in North Carolina and Virginia. And that is the first time that I really remember seeing that map that you did of the slaves coming to South America and then coming from South America to the Caribbean and then from the Caribbean to the United States. It's just interesting. But what do you think about the Native American community? Do you think that they embrace this fact that they are mixed and they are also probably Latin American, African American, Caucasian. All of us are cousins. But what do you think about that intersection?
I agree. Absolutely. We definitely are cousins. And while I cannot speak for that group, what I can say is that there is also a very common history of interaction between Native Americans and Afro descendants throughout the Americas. I think that if anything, it is not a far jump for there to be a shared understanding of not only shared history and heritage, but also shared genes. And so I think that wrapping in the conversation of diversity and like celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, we can't have that without including that group as well. And so I think that we need to spend more time understanding those connections and highlighting those connections. I think for me, Dr. Arwen Smallwood is my hero in that respect and the time that he has put into that. But I definitely think that, yes, it is something that needs to be acknowledged more. I don't think it would be a far cry from what is already understood culturally, but it's up to us as outsiders to shed light on that, as I think it's already internally pretty well known.
Does anybody else have any? Melania, do you have any comment about that? Or Jerry, do you have, I think you have some more questions. So we got questions. We just need to ask them.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. What is your experience like designing curriculums and bringing your research into classrooms or sharing with the community and professional groups?
Oh, man. The experience is definitely humbling. So I think that building curriculum in general is something that I love to do. I love getting into the weeds of like, what about this worksheet or what about this video, and playing with time. But being able to kind of step outside of it and say, okay, not only is it important for me to understand what I'm teaching, but who I am as I teach it. So being a person who is not of Latin American descent, I know my last name is deceiving. I'm married in Mejia. My husband is Peruvian. I'm an Anthony. I think that it's on one end for folks who also are not of Latin American descent. They can relate to me in a different way because I know what it's like to be an outsider and have to kind of like work my way in and understand and be humbled by the information that I find and approach things with respect and honor the people who are writing these resources and knowing when to step back. So building curriculum and also teaching it is such a great experience to know that I'm not alone out there. And people are excited to see, okay, I don't really need to have this heritage to dig in because you really don't. And on the other side of that, when I am having interactions with and teaching with folks who are of Latin American heritage, it's also wonderful to learn new things together. And I also love getting feedback as well. I think that it is so important to have these people in the room with me as I teach to hold me accountable and also teach me things that I don't even know as well. So it's humbling in that it's great to see where I came from when I'm teaching people who are new to the field. And it's also great to have people there to give me feedback and make sure I'm staying on track and accountable with what I'm teaching. And making sure things are up to date and relevant. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna ask a question, and then Jerry has a couple of others, I'm certain. Sure. I'm piggybacking back to the Native Americans because I have a lot of students that are Hispanic as well as African American and Caucasian and other races. But what I do have in conversation with my students that are Mexican is the fact that they really are Native Americans, and just because we took Texas and made it different, they're going back and forth across the border because that's their cousins, that's their real grandmamas. So I think that we really need to do a better job of looking at the geographic whole thing with all of the groups. But because when we think about Latin America, it's South America and Mexico and the United States. And I would say going all the way up to Alaska. What do you think about that? That's just my personal way of making sure that they know that just because you put kittens in the oven and bake them, that does not make them biscuits.
Yeah, absolutely. No, one of my favorite resources is a site called Decolonial Atlas. And the Decolonial Atlas kind of breaks down, and its mission is to show maps when instructing that don't really match the maps of today. Like understanding, okay, yes, we have North, South, Central America, we have Africa, but like taking the boundaries and rerouting them and saying, okay, these are the groups that were here. This is how long they were there. This is the language that they speak. This is how they refer to themselves. Here is how, the language of the oppressor refers to that group, and like breaking that down. I think that resource is definitely huge. And I think that opening our minds to those maps and those resources kind of help us make those connections. And it starts with asking a simple question. I sat down in one of my history classes with ninth graders and was like, okay, so All of us don't have a ton of British heritage in this classroom, so why do we speak English? Or like, why is Spanish the main language in Latin America? Why is Portuguese Brazil's main language? And it's like you understand that, okay, we speak this language in this space, but understanding how we got there is huge. And so I think that asking those simple questions and tracking things back in a way that's like, not in a condescending way, but making sure people understand that series of events, and also paying attention to the visuals that we use, and understanding that the boundaries we know of today are a speck on the timeline of the earth and how things have been is definitely a good combo for entering those conversations with those students in a way that feels approachable and not a way that feels demeaning. That's at least the approach that I've used.
Okay, we interrupting again to make sure the audience knows if you have questions or comments, you can ask them in the chat. We are down to 8 minutes before it's time to end. So it goes by really quick, but we might go a little bit longer because I think you're a wonderful guest and we're gonna definitely have you back. Jerry, got some more questions for her?
Yes, I do. What are some trends you're observing with the current Latino youth?
Oh man. So from my observation, I've noticed that there is I wouldn't say an increased pride in heritage. I say that there is a different platform of displaying pride. I think that we often, when we talk about generations of groups, we often fall into the path of saying, well, back then, it wasn't the same. They were silenced. They weren't advocates for themselves, but now we're doing it right. We have always been, in these groups of color in the US and abroad, advocating for ourselves. It just looks different. So for this group in particular of youth, there's this internet generation of folks. I caught the tail end of it with my year of birth, but I think that they are more verbal about their connections to their culture. And there's an increased pride there. What I've seen online with like Instagram and YouTube videos and TikToks, I see a lot of videos of people coming from different coming from different cultures, being able to connect with one another, saying, hey, like, I come from a family that has like a lot of cousins and we eat these foods and we do these dances and this is how we celebrate our holidays. And somebody else from another region saying, oh my gosh, us too. So having the internet at your fingertips and being able to make those connections is definitely a huge thing that I'm seeing, in a lot of unification. And then in terms of advocacy, I'm seeing a lot more calling out of unhealthy stereotypes in the media. And I think that that's a really good rolling conversation to have too. And so I'm seeing a lot of pride. I'm seeing a lot of healthy critique. And then I'm seeing a lot of advocacy that spans in larger spaces because they have access to the internet and they have access to connecting with each other in ways that I'm sure would have been done with past generations, but just didn't have the tools yet. So I'm very excited to see what my children will do and what other students that I've seen will do in their future. And so I'm quite optimistic for the future, for sure, for what culture is going to look like.
Faith, I did have a question for you, and it has to do with stereotypes. You mentioned it a moment ago. So, when we're talking about Latin American and Spanish-speaking countries, there are over 21 of them. So there's certainly, depending on the area of the U.S. that you live, you may be assimilated or know more about certain culture than others. So how are practical ways for breaking down those barriers and stereotypes?
That's a good question. I think that the deeper we get into the internet age, the less excuses we have. There are TV shows that are that may say that they represent a certain group, and that's great. But I think that I would encourage people to dig deeper into who the producer is, who's at the table, who are the writers. So if it is media, the way that you learn culture, I say that there are now increasing resources of TV shows and music and podcasts to dig into to get an understanding. If that is not your thing, I always suggest text. Then again, looking at who is writing that text, and then also chat rooms online, going to a ministry or serving in a community where people don't look like you. I think that there is no cheat code to all of a sudden having no biases. I think it's just about taking the time to understand, because when you understand folks, you can then be more critical of the information that you're taking in and just be a better community member in general, to not call people out, but call people in and continue that learning. So I think that we have the resources. It's just a matter of doing a little bit more research and saying, okay, who's creating these resources? And is this a healthy space for me to learn about others? Yeah, that's what I've utilized for myself. And it's a constant learning journey for sure.
All right. And now you getting ready to ask another or make a comment, Melania?
I was just going to thank her, and go ahead, Michael. I know you had a question.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I'm going to let the audience know we will go over 10 minutes. So it'll end at 12:40, but at 12:30, we're going to play a little musical piece for you just so you can be a little entertained. You got any more questions, Jerry?
Yes. Do you think the trends of youth mirror older populations, and are the attitudes dependent on locations and experiences with different populations within countries? And are they from one country to another?
That's a really good question. And yes, I think that there are definite larger differences in trends in terms of region and the nation. And then you go to the micro level talking about personality type and culture within family units. But I think that, like I said before, older populations and past generations have always been advocates for themselves. It just looked different. So what I've noticed is that, and this also is something that mirrors my own culture with my African-American heritage, is that the generation before my own was all about getting in the door, right? Whether that's being in front of classrooms, whether that's being on boards of directors, whether that's being in certain occupations that we didn't really have access to before. And this current generation is about having equality, respect, and dignity when they're in those doors. And so I think that there's a lot more collaboration that could occur that will be beneficial because the mission is very much so the same. It's just getting into the details of what equality looks like and what fairness looks like for each person. And so I think that we're moving forward in a positive direction for sure in terms of Latino populations in the U.S. And it's getting into the details now of, we talked about this before, what gender equality looks like, discussions of gender neutrality and what language should look like, discussions of equal pay, discussions of rights to healthcare. And so we're in those doors now, thanks to the people who came before us. So now that we're in there, okay, now we have the seat at the table to bring perspectives in to say, okay, this is what our needs are. This is what our needs have always been, but now we have the platform to really discuss this. And so it's very much so collaborative because we're standing on the shoulders of folks who came before us, but now it's an exciting time to where we can be more vocal and a little bit safer in that vocality, although it's of course not perfect, and get some more stuff done.
All right. Any other questions, Jerry? Because this will be the last one before we take the break. Okay.
Okay. What advice would you give to students? What advice would you give to students who want to learn more about the topics you addressed today?
Oh man, I say lean into your coaches at Wake Tech or wherever you are. I would say figure out what your door is. My door was music. Figure out if it looks like taking a cooking class or a dance class, or if it looks like logging on to a different gaming server with Spanish speakers and seeing what that feels like and looks like. I say find your door into the study. And then once you're in there, lean into what interests you. And it's okay to be overwhelmed. It's okay to take breaks because it's a lot of heavy topics that we talk about, but it's definitely worth the walk. So find your door, pace yourself, and give yourself grace as you continue on in the study.
Okay, and I want to make a couple of announcements right before the break. And the first one is to the audience. We're going to do something that we don't often do. We're going to put some links in the chat that you can get later. And so I'm going to ask Sarah to put the Success Coach link in there. And then we're going to, if it's okay with Faith, we can put her presentation in there. But you let us know. And then we're going to also ask for the African-American Latino mixer for that particular show to also be put in the chat. So you're going to get a part of it now. She's getting ready to move us to the side and play one of the selections that two of the musicians did at the African-American Latino mixer. And I do hope to work with Melania and the Spanish department and other departments to do something like this in real life and maybe get you back, Faith. But we talked about that at the mixer, that we'd like to do something bigger on the campus outside and have music and art and food. So maybe the pandemic will subside and we could do it in the spring. All right. Is there a problem? There we go. Thank you, Sarah. We asked Sarah to do multiple things, but she does good. Thank you. Okay, we're all excited. Now we're ready to go back, Sarah. But thank you so much. If I realized he was that close, I would have let him finish. But thank you all for hanging out with us a little bit longer. And I want to ask Melania, do you have any comments from what you heard so far?
I think, like Faith had stated, having that open dialogue and be willing to listen and be willing to explore. I think one of the challenging things is to give ourselves the permission to, it's okay to ask that question, and it's okay to engage in some things that sometimes we may not feel comfortable asking or partaking, like she mentioned, a cooking class or a dance class. And it may be that in your experience, dancing is not something that you have ever considered. So I think being open, I think helps. Also being honest and learning who you are first. And like she had said, it really resonated with me that it's hard to ask those questions when you don't have enough figure out who you are and who you identify with. And I think often, I'm always asked that question is like, how can I learn more? How can I be more engaged? And to me, it's always, like Faye said, there's so many opportunities out there, and it starts whatever your circle of influence or circle of friends are. And I know WayTech offers tons of opportunities for students to be engaged, but they're also in the chamber of any of the cities that we live in, Raleigh or Cary or any of the suburbs. So I think being willing to listen and being willing to explore, and that's what we are. We're in a higher education situation where we're here to learn, we're here to grow, we're here to learn more about not just ourselves, but others as well. So I encourage everybody to continue studying, continue reaching, and continue being engaged. The journey never stops, the journey continues, but also looking at history. I think, like Faye had said, we learn so much from history, and we learn what worked and what didn't work. And it helps to acknowledge, what that happened in order to move forward in a positive direction. So.
Hey, Jerry, do you have another? Well, first of all, we have some comments. So let's see those comments, Sarah. This is from Christian Richer. Love faith. You want to get that one? Jerry, you know Allison Welly from the Museum of History.
Yeah, Allison says, so informative. Thank you.
Cobra Royalty, you got that, Jerry?
He says, thank you for your perspective, Faith.
All right. Well, thank you for your comments. And we are winding down. We got 5 more minutes. So I guess that, Jerry, you get to ask one more question.
All right. This one's going to be a little bit of a handful. All right. Some of the questions maybe, how can people get in touch with you? Contact, phone, email, or website?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will type this as well at the same time as I'm speaking. So let's see if I can do that. Best way to get in touch with me is faith.anthonymejia@gmail.com. I'm incredibly responsive there. As I kind of roll and develop resources I'm learning now, I need to listen to the advice of my mother and go ahead and make a website. So as soon as I have that up, I'll be able to share that. But until then, that is the best way to reach out to me. If you have questions about resources or reading lists that I have and quite enjoy, I would absolutely love to be able to help people along with their journey.
And I think that we will probably be able to put that up, Faith, at the very end. And I also wanted to make sure that people knew that the Museum of History is getting ready to have their American Indian Heritage Festival. I don't know the exact date, but it is the same day of Raleigh's Christmas parade usually, and I think it is the Saturday before Thanksgiving. And also the Museum of History is the sponsor, and African-American Heritage Commission as well, of the official statewide kickoff for Black History Month, which is the last Saturday of January. And I want to see if Sarah can put that link in the chat, because the deadline for anybody that wants to perform or present is the 15th, which is Friday. So you can just go ahead and submit your application, And the theme is Black People, Green Planet, Environmental Justice. But your theme is always going to be able to work its way in. I don't care what kind of music you play, what you sing, all the poetry, we can work you in. And there is a small honorarium for anyone that is selected. I just happen to be on that advisory board, as I mentioned, and so is my visitor. She is here. We're going to be talking over lunch. But thank you, Sarah. And that's it. Yes, you want to scroll down, and we just want y'all to see where it is and just keep on going. Where it says apply for the AACC, just click and the application comes up and you just hit submit. It's very simple. So I just want y'all to be aware. And if Sarah, if you could put that in the chat for the show as well, that would be great. And Jerry, now you can ask your very last question.
Actually, I don't believe I have a last question, but
well, good. So now everybody,
I'm happy to be here, part of the experience, very good information you guys have given.
Well, thank you, Jerry. Thank you for all you do. And do you have any closing comments, Melania? And then we'll end with Faith.
Continue the journey, continue being open, continue to be willing to listen and also to be heard. I think it's important. And thank you, Michael, for the opportunity to be part of this important conversation and also to share this space, a safe space for us to chat and collaborate. So, of course, thank you to Faith and Jerry and also to Sarah for all the wonderful topics that we have covered today. So thank you and have a blessed day.
We have a question in the chat. So Cobra Royalty, got that, Jerry? And can you answer that, Faith?
Yeah, Cobra Royalty says, do you have any plans to write a book about today's topic, Faith?
Oh man, the book writing. I would love for author to be below my name on bios, and I definitely plan to find some sort of way to get published work out there. One of my eternal struggles has been focus. So for me, I'm the type of person to read 4 books at the same time instead of just power through one. And so I think that I would love to, but once I have the ability to focus in on what I would like to share and what I would like to publish, I would definitely like to, if it's not a text, I'd like to create something more accessible, such as a lesson plan or a blog. So work definitely is in the works and on the way.
Well, thank everyone for attending. We can wave goodbye and we'll see you next time. We're going to get you back, Faith. Jerry knows we're going to get you back.
Awesome. Thank you, Melania, Jerry, Sarah. Thank you.
And Allison, so wonderful to hear both Faith and Melania.
Spectacular.
Gracias. You know, I don't know Spanish that good. But
Thank you, Allison. Have a good day, everyone.
Mil gracias. Adiós.
Adiós.
Adiós.